By my clock, it's reached 4 o'clock, so my watch, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the City of Meridian Solid Waste Advisory Commission regularly scheduled meeting for November 28th, 2018. It is now 1 minute after 4, and we'll start with roll call. Please indicate if you're present. Mark Nelson has identified to me that he will be late. Steve Corey, here. Carrie Glenn.
Here.
Dave Neal.
Here.
Megan Larson. Andrea Pogue. Scott Walters.
Here.
And Victoria Madrigal.
Here.
Quorum, well, let's see. Ex officio members, Councilwoman Genesis Milam.
Here.
And Rochelle Klein.
Here.
Quorum being present, we will go ahead and proceed with business. First is approval of the agenda. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. Are there any comments or motions?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the agenda be approved as written. Further comments? Sensing the commission is ready for a vote. All those in favor of approving the agenda as written signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The motion passes. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the October 24th, 2018 meeting. Are there any comments on that proposed minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the minutes for October 24th, 2018 be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the minutes from the October 24th meeting be approved as written. Are there further comments? Sensing the commission is ready for a vote, all those in favor of approving the minutes as written signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion passes by voice vote. Thank you. We now move into the action items in old business. The first item under old business is Trash or Treasure citywide program planning discussion. Brett Branco, if you would come on forward, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, thank you for allowing me to come and have a moment of your time. I promise I won't be here too long. In regards to me being here, I do have to apologize in advance. I am at the tail end of a cold, so if you do see a snot bubble coming out my nose, I do apologize.
Here.
No, thank you. If you can recall, back in May of this year, I did come before you to give you the results of the Trash or Treasure event for 2018, and you unanimously voted for me to go in front of City Council and ask for permission for it to become a citywide program and to be taken by the city. And 6 months later, I have not had the opportunity to go before them. Either they've been extremely busy, or when they're free, I've been extremely busy. So speaking with Commissioner Pogue, who is absent this evening, she and I felt it would be in the best interest of the Solid Waste Advisory Commission to run it by you once more, make sure that this is, in fact, that you guys do wish for me to speak in front of City Council, requesting them to take it on as a city program, most likely the Public Works Department, I would assume, due to them having the recycling and other waste programs, and to make it a citywide event for 2019. Do you approve for me to go in front of City Council still?
Members of the commission, is there any comments or motions?
I move to approve Trash or Treasure citywide so that Brett can go and talk to the city council, pitch it to them.
Second it.
Okay, if the maker of the motion, may I go ahead and
Yes, please.
have a little bit of liberty and say that you are moving that we confirm to Brett that we would
Right.
like him to go before city council and request approval for the trash treasure to be run in 2019 citywide.
Well said.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we, as stated. Is there further comments on the motion? Sensing the commission is ready for a vote, all those in favor of giving Brett Baranko permission to go before the city council to request permission for Trash or Treasure to be run in 2019 citywide, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? The motion passes.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
Brett.
much. And if I may add one more thing, Mr. Chair, if you are able, when I'll speak to Andrea Pogue to get something set for me to speak to him in front of City Council, when the time comes, if you are able, would you be willing to accompany me in front of them to show the backing of the Solid Waste Advisory Commission?
Not only would I be able to, I'd be very, very happy to do it. So
Thank you
just
very
keep
much.
me informed on which night it's going to be, and I'll be there.
I will do that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Commission, thank you very much.
The next item on the agenda is solid waste roles and responsibilities. Discussion continued. David.
We on?
They all say unmuted.
Nope, here's one.
Muted.
Muted? Muted? Unmuted?
You didn't get a copy.
Talk loud. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. This is follow-up conversation to our last conversation about roles and responsibilities. As you recall, staff has been approved to bring on a resource, which we're in the process of hiring for that resource. In conjunction with that, we've been looking at the Solid Waste Advisory Commission ordinance section to clean it up and align that staff resource coming on board to support SWAC. And we had a discussion at last session about what some of those changes could look like. We left you with a document and time to review that document and maybe generate any questions or comments that you had. What you have in front of you is that same document. I did make some revisions just so that it's for readability purposes. You got some line numbers down the side so that we can refer to any lines on a question-by-question basis, make it a little easier. And then I added back in the word, I know there was conversation about the word policy in some of these sections, particularly items 1 and 4 of section 262 on the front there under duties and powers. So the word policy went back in there. Basically, we looked through the rest of the commission sections and other commissions, did some talking, and didn't really see a reason why that word shouldn't be in there. So we just put it back in there for conversation's sake. Because I know at the time Commissioner Larson had asked about that. Other than that, it's essentially the same document that you've seen. So I leave it to the commission to have a conversation about whether or not they're comfortable moving this document forward. It's headline state and approving those changes, or whether or not there's further conversation or questions about it.
Members of the commission, any comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Dave, in the ordinance, is there a reason that there's not a term length of time that they would serve, or would that be in the bylaws?
Chair, Commissioner Neal, Mary can probably back me up and reiterate, but I believe in the overriding commission ordinance, that's where terms, length of terms is discussed. 100% certain on that, though.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, Commissioner Neal, I mean, Dave is correct. I was trying to pull it up. It's really slow, but we have an overriding section that deals with all commissions, length of terms, numbers of members, things like that. And then the individual ones for each commission have just the specificity of the duties, powers. If the membership qualifications are different for the arts versus this commission versus P&Z. So that's where that's contained. But the overall one, again, if this was moving a little faster, it would give the number, but it is contained in a different section of the code.
Okay, thank you.
Members of the commission, any comments or questions or motions?
Mr. Chairman. And David, without additional recommended changes, do you consider this final?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Neal, from staff perspective, yes. As written with the red line changes, it satisfies needs from our perspective.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that the Solid Waste Advisory Commission, the roles and responsibilities as outlined in the proposed ordinance be approved.
Second?
Again, if I might, if the maker of the motion would allow me to go ahead and basically that we have reviewed the proposed changes to the ordinance associated with Solid Waste Advisory Commission and recommend that it be forwarded to City Council with our recommendation that it be approved.
I agree.
Yes,
Okay.
that's.
And the second also agreed, so I got a head nod, so. Okay, so what is before us is a recommendation that the draft changes to the Solid Waste Advisory Commission ordinance be forwarded to City Council for consideration with our recommendation that they be approved. Is there further comments or questions from the commission? Sensing the commission is ready for a vote, all those in favor of forwarding the proposed changes to the City Council with our recommendation that they be approved, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? The motion passes.
Thank you very much, Commission.
And next on our agenda is the sidewalk container placement update. Rochelle.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I'll just pass these out because there are two stapled documents for each of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. One more set, sorry.
Andrea, or Michelle. Mark Nelson's arriving. You may want to give him this copy.
I might have to, I don't know what happened, probably still might call it.
Oh,
Let me see, actually.
I'll share.
Do you mind making a copy?
Rochelle, I had brought a copy of both of these, so I can give you the,
Oh, so you'll share with me?
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We're up to the sidewalk placement thing, and it's just started with the handout of that, so.
Thank you. That worked out well. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, again, Rochelle Klein with Public Services. And Commissioner Pogue and I met twice after our last SWAC meeting to discuss cart placement. That came up last meeting. And as far as where carts should be placed on a regular basis, and with Meridian's growth and some of the feedback we've been getting from residents in specific areas, we wanted to look at the overall city code on placement and maybe update it to better align with what the needs are here in the Meridian community. So we were asked to, or Commissioner Pogue was asked to look at what other cities were doing, and as far as cart placement and what their codes, how their codes read, and compare it to what Meridian currently has, and maybe make some recommendations. And that's in one document. The two of us worked on that, and I'll walk through that document. And at the same time, there was an internal document here in City Hall. Commissioner Pogue sent a request for feedback up to the mayor's office, to Casey Emery and Shandy Lamb, and then over to Public Works, and David had a chance to review it. And so that is a separate document. I want to make sure that you had all input. So that is the second document that has Andrea Pogue's name on the upper left hand corner. And on the back, David looked at the existing ordinance and provided a suggested red line. So we'll have that to work from, as well as the document that Andrea and I, summarized based on other city codes on cart placement, and then also the feedback we got from you guys last meeting. So at the top of the actual memo to the SWAC commissioners, Section 1 is the current Meridian City Code regarding cart placement, and really there's in Section 3, 3B, and in item number 1 deals with cart placement, and it's it reads pretty well. I mean, for me, it seemed pretty straightforward, but it said customers, I'll just read it, a location of placement. Customers shall place wheeled carts containing solid waste or recyclable materials to be collected by the franchisee at the alley or street curb with a handle facing the premises. The wheeled cart shall be at least 3 feet from any obstruction which may impede automated collection, including but not limited to other wheeled carts, mailboxes, fire hydrants, low-hanging trees or shrubs, parked cars, portable basketball hoops, utility poles, and walls. In no case shall a wheeled cart be placed more than 4 feet from the curb for collection. Wheeled carts shall be positioned clear of pedestrian and vehicular traffic and shall be clearly visible and accessible to the waste collection personnel at all times. So that is the existing code section regarding cart placement. And then in Section 2 of this memo, we looked at proposed updates. And so on the next, if you kind of flip forward in Section 3, just to give you an idea, Section 3 identifies all the different cities and counties that we reviewed in putting this together. So in Section 3, items 1 through 7, those are the 7 separate codes that we looked at to make the recommendations in 2, just to kind of give you some context around this. But going back to Section 2, the proposed updates, what we did was we looked at item 3B, which dealt with location, and we thought it might be clearer to bullet out or just sort of itemize specific requirements for collection, that might make it clearer than the paragraph format that is currently in place. And so we basically pulled together a smorgasbord of what we thought was some of the better ideas from other city codes. And so the first one was at the street 3B1, was at the street curb or as close to the street curb as possible or the alley if the property has alley access. So, and you can see there in letter A, in no case shall a wheel cart be placed more than 4 feet from the street curb or alley, except where the sidewalk is adjacent to the street curb. Then no wheel cart shall be placed further than the inside edge of the sidewalk. So I'm not sure if you guys have questions about any of these as we go through, or if you think they're actually adding confusion to it, or if you think they're unnecessary, let me know. These are just proposed ideas. So item 2, wheel carts shall not block safe pedestrian, bicycle, or vehicle access to streets, alleys, bike paths, or sidewalks. And then 3, and these are a hybrid, so we took parts of the paragraph that's existing, and we added language in from some of the other codes. So wheel carts shall be placed at least 3 feet from any obstruction which may impede automated collection, including but not limited to other wheeled carts, mailboxes, fire hydrants, shrubs, parked cars, portable basketball hoops, utility poles, or walls. So that's exactly what it is currently. And number 4 is new. So it's the placement of wheeled carts shall have overhead clearance of at least 14 feet and be located away from overhanging obstructions such as utility lines, trees, or buildings. So the 14-foot clearance requirement is just one that we have in our trucks. That's how the clearance we need to tip the cart into the top of the truck. And that's not in the current ordinance, but or a city code, but it is the minimum overhead clearance we need to service a cart. And number 5 was not changed. Wheel carts shall be positioned to be clearly visible and accessible to the waste collection personnel at all times. And number 6 was not changed. Wheel carts shall be placed with the handle facing the premises. And number 7 was, that one is new. So we said for residential areas where no street curbs or alleys exist and which may or may not have sidewalks, wheel carts shall be positioned in front of each residential premise where the property boundary meets the street or public right-of-way, and in such a manner not to interfere with safe pedestrian or vehicular traffic. We do have properties in Meridian that don't have a sidewalk, so the actual property boundary comes right up to the asphalt, which is the street, and so we had to make an accommodation, we felt, for those properties. I think Commissioner Pogue's house would be one of those. So that was a good example, and so that's a new bullet based on another city. And number 8 is also a new, would be an addition. Alternative location placement standards may be imposed by the city or its solid waste franchisee based upon considerations of vehicle access, site-specific conditions, and operational efficiency and convenience. For residential areas, curb pickup shall be used unless otherwise ordered. And then number 9, customers who place wheel carts in locations that do not comply with the standards set forth in this section may be subject to carry-out service and an additional fee and the penalty provisions set forth, and then it gives this section. And the reason for 7 and 8 is or 8 and 9, is we do have situations where we have to move the carts for access reasons. Like there's a fire hydrant there, we can't block it, or it's a cul-de-sac and part of the curb is striped, so there's no parking. Or there are just a number of residential carts all tight in an alley. And so we will ask some of the residents to move their carts down to accommodate those kind of in the elbow of the cul-de-sac. And so in those cases, we have sent supervisors out to help determine a serviceable location. We do have some just odd properties that we do need help. The customers need help with identifying a safe and accessible location. In those cases, we do go out and we help them find a spot. And then, if they decide not to put the carts in an accessible location, then the next provision is that they would be charged a carry-out fee if we have to leave the truck and run to grab those carts and service them and then run them back to the household. So those were the proposed changes based on the cities or municipalities outlined in Section 3. And so that's from Andrea Pogue and myself. And then on the next, the memo, it's not a memo, it's actually an email string from Andrea Pogue. If you look at the back, the very last page, there's some ideas within this, but on the very last page, staff has some red-lined recommendations for the existing city code, and those are the addition there. You can see at the bottom, in addition to the word curbside instead of at the street curb in section B, and there's one also correction or change to item B, not block pedestrian, bicycle, or vehicle access to street, alley, bike paths, or sidewalks. So that's the only change to section B, and then the next three are new as proposed by staff. So I'll just read those like I read the changes to the last document. But number 1, for residential areas where no street curbs or alleys exist and which may or may not have sidewalks, wheel carts shall be positioned in front of each residential premise where the property boundary meets the street or public right-of-way in such a manner not to interfere with safe pedestrian or vehicular traffic. So that's also, you'll see that in both proposals. Number 2, alternative location placement standards may be imposed by the city. So that's the same as the last document. And 3, customers who place wheeled carts in locations that do not comply with the standards set forth in this section may be subject to carry-out service and additional fee and the penalty provisions set forth. So those are overlapping, but the changes in item B are the ones to really focus on. And really, probably the biggest is the difference between at the street curb and curbside. So it seems like semantics, but I think the feedback I get from the mayor's office and from David, feedback was that it's probably clearer to say curbside because that's a specific definition according to traffic, right? It's a more specific, I guess, depiction of where the cart should go. But at the street curb also has the flexibility of, with what we're dealing right now, the street curb has the flexibility of being at the edge of the sidewalk with the wheels at the street, right at the street, or in the gutter with the wheels up against the curb. So we've actually, as Meridian has grown and we have some narrow streets and we have some access issues, we have had neighborhoods move their carts into the street, and the way the current code is written allows for that. But it's really a matter of clarity and what you guys think might be, I guess, clearer to customers, to residents, and to staff. So I probably made that a lot more confusing than it needed to be, but we are trying to improve this so that as Meridian grows, it's pretty straightforward on how customers should place their carts out on collection days. Do you guys have questions? And do you have a preference? I guess, do you have a preference? Because we can actually, we just because we looked at this one way doesn't mean that there aren't additional options. There might be, better ways to talk about cart placement.
Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Milam.
I guess the real question that I'm seeing is, do you want to allow a sidewalk as curb placement, or do you want them in the street? Right? That's the real difference between ours with all its complexity and these really simple definitions from other cities. To me, theirs are much clearer than what ours is. And the main difference is our curbside is a little bit different than theirs.
The street curb. Okay.
I don't know. That's just my perception. So
and to I guess shed some light on the ACHD and police access portions that came up earlier. We do work really closely with ACHD on street sweeping. We've worked for many years with the postal workers and USPS to make sure that residents know not to block mailboxes. So in other areas where carts are in the street, it works well. They know they have to leave access around their mailbox. And then also ACHD has all of our routes, and they know which days we service which parts of Meridian, and they have street sweeping on different days. So so we don't generally interfere with one another from a street sweeping perspective, I guess.
Members of the commission, do you have any questions or comments for Rochelle?
Mr. Chair, I think my only comment, or I did have a question regarding the 4 foot. Is the the 4-foot max is the reach of the truck.
That's the reach of the
capable
arm,
of do that.
right?
Okay. And then the only comment that I would have is no matter how you do this, it's either going to be impeding vehicle traffic. If it's in the curb, it's in the curb, it's sticking out in the road, it's going to, the street sweepers, the mailman, people driving down the road trying to get in and out of cars, parked cars. Or you're gonna impede pedestrian traffic. You can't have both. It's gonna do one or the other. So I think no matter how we word it, there's gonna be issues. That would be my only comment.
And luckily, it's only one day of the week, so it's one day. And
Yeah. I guess my only other comment would be the shorter the better. If we try to spell it out for every situation, you're gonna miss something and we're gonna be back. Because somebody's gonna nitpick it apart.
So the current protocol, which was vetted by committee when the city rolled out carts, is on the sidewalk, all the way to the edge of the sidewalk with the wheels at the edge. And that works well. I mean, we don't have a preference on the service side. As long as we have the 4-foot, within a 4-foot range of the truck, we can grab a cart. I think Councilwoman Milam pointed out, she said, even though customers may put their cart nicely at the edge, by the time the driver takes it and shakes it in the top of the truck and puts it down, it might be kind of cattywampus, and it's not as, perfectly lined up with the curb. That being said, we have always tried to accommodate neighborhoods that want to move their carts into the street. So if it would be a big undertaking, which is absolutely fine, if the idea was to move all carts into the street, we could work with that and we can do that. Right now, it's sort of on a case-by-case basis, and it seems to work for the most part, although last time when we were here, Councilwoman Milam said that by the end of her service day, there are a lot of carts kind of on the sidewalks on all different areas, definitely impeding sidewalk access.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Could I ask a question? Because I think I was on this committee when we wrote it the first time. Right now, today, are most of the residential collection on the sidewalk?
Yes.
So re-educating people to move it would probably be a fairly significant undertaking to get everyone to move it off of the sidewalk into the street.
It would.
So the default of this, and I agree, I mean, curbside, I'm looking at just the dictionary definition, and it says it's the edge of the pavement, but it doesn't, and it's bordered by the curb, which
Right.
could be the street or the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And so I don't think no matter how we define it or describe it, you're going to always have people that differ as to what they perceive. But if the default of the commission is the preference in general in most residential areas primarily is the edge of the sidewalk is where we would like the cart edge to be, then I think you've got it as close as you can to get there. You will have people that disagree, and you will always have, as I think Commissioner Glenn stated correctly, you're either going to obstruct the sidewalk occasionally or you're going to obstruct the street. So either one of those, I think I like brevity more than a lot of description, but since this question gets asked a dozen times a year,
Yeah.
it seems it's probably, if the commission's preference is primarily the sidewalk is the most ideal location for these, in the circumstances where no sidewalk exists, the sidewalks are narrow, the subdivision prefers them in the street because of the way their subdivision is laid out, and that's something Republic can work with. I think that's probably the most reasonable middle ground this commission could find. Because I don't think, no matter whether you say curbside or at the curb, there's some people are going to think that's the street and some people are going to think that's the sidewalk. I don't know that we're ever going to get everyone to agree what that means. But that seems to be the middle ground when we've had this conversation before, that majority of the folks in most of the newer areas of the city, the sidewalks are large enough to accommodate a mailbox and a garbage can one day a week for the garbage can, without it being too much of an obstruction for the rest of the public. We can't lawyer it to make it better, so, sorry.
So my feedback on that is I've lived in the same house for 25 years. And for the first 15, I had nowhere to walk to from my house. But in the last 10, we walk a lot because there's services in walking distance, and the city is pushing unplug
Yeah.
and bicycles, and when I go for walks, there's a lot of times it's out in the street and back around all this stuff. And so in practice, looking at all the young people walking kids down the street, a lot of times there isn't room between, every other house have the mailbox that I have to remember to pay attention to. But I can see where it would be just, to me, it seems easier or safer in the long run. The can goes in the street unless there's a reason not to. But I don't know how that is in practice and also that 4 feet from the curb, does that mean it's an 8-foot swing? Depending on who's reading the sentence. Could be from the curb to the house or from the curb to the street.
And it really should be 4 feet from where the truck can access the container,
Yeah.
because that's the idea, is that we have a lateral ability to reach out 4 feet from the truck to grab carts. So, and it's sitting on, whether it's in the street or whether it's at the street curb on the edge, we can grab those. But when it's back close to the lawn and it's a wide sidewalk, it makes it a lot more difficult. So,
especially if somebody else is parked in such a way, the truck can't get against the curb.
right.
And
And that happens in some of our older parts of town where there are a lot of cars on the streets.
Mr. Chair, I guess my only comment is I'm relatively newly mobile in a car, but even when I didn't have a car, it's easier to maneuver around a trash can on the sidewalk when it's physically on the sidewalk and walking past it as a pedestrian than it is to maneuver around a giant clunky trash can in the street in a vehicle. And I feel like that might impose a safety hazard almost if it were in the street.
Members of the commission, additional comments or questions associated with Rochelle's presentation? David?
I know there's some history with prior commissions, and Bill, maybe you can speak to this, with ACHD and their past concerns about being in the street. We can certainly, as the commission, reach out to ACHD, talk to all the ACHD about any concerns of roadway obstructions or hazards that may create. That's what the commission chooses. And to me, this is a bit of maybe a picture's worth 1,000 words. I know the last meeting we discussed whether or not the material that's advertised is sensitive, so that messaging the same thing, whether it's coming from the city. Certainly will work and clean that up for whatever the commission decides, but if you'd like us to work with ACHD to find out whether or not they have any concerns about it being in the street, so do that. Bill, do you have any past experience with what was discussed in the past with ACHD?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So in the past, the ACHD has always been concerned about obstructions in the street. And for a couple of reasons. One, it obstructs parking. It pushes parking to another location. Again, it creates a different type of hazard or concern. Also, of course, the potential of collisions with cars and trash cans. And that's why I think the general preference has always been that the trash cans go on the sidewalk unless there are areas that it makes greater sense because of the configuration, the layout of the neighborhood, the layout of the sidewalk. Thinking of, down Main Street, some of those areas, they have to put them in the street because there's a planter strip in between the sidewalk that's greater than 4 feet. So they couldn't put it on the sidewalk. They have to put them in the street. Other areas, again, that's not quite an issue. But I think the ACHD's preference has always been to not have them as the default to be in the street because of potential for collisions, hazards, creating different types of road congestion, as well as the street sweeping, which in my personal opinion is not a huge issue. That's something that can be coordinated, but the others are realistic that, especially as winter comes and people hitting them and things like that, they've always been concerned about those issues, and that was why their sort of default was the sidewalk.
And Mr. Chairman, just the nice thing is there are lots of hybrids out there. So and where I live, they're required to be in the street with the handle facing the house. I live on a narrow, steep, windy street where the sidewalks are pretty wide, but there is no bike lane, and the road narrows as it heads down. So on my stretch of the street, we all have to have ours on the sidewalk with our wheels at the edge. And then down at the bottom of the hill, they're all back in the street. So I think a lot of it depends on how wide your bike lanes are or how narrow your streets are. And so there are lots of successful hybrids out there too, which I think the code allows for flexibility. Like Bill said, some subdivisions, may choose to have everybody put them in the street or everybody put them on the sidewalk. And so far, we've been able to work through each scenario. I think a wholesale change would be, you might get more people upset than we need to because it might be working in their neighborhood the way it is right now. But it's, we're flexible. My job is to collect information and come back with recommendations for to tweak this and come back again, so.
And Rochelle, let me thank you on behalf of the commission for doing that for us. We do appreciate being able to get to the side look to see what other cities are doing. I will throw in my statement. We do have a hybrid subdivision, and so coming to the edge of the street to the curb, then there's a 4-foot lawn stretch, and then the sidewalk is beyond that 4-foot spot. So the driveways come out going across the sidewalk area, but there's a 4-foot stretch there at the end of the driveway where most of the people put their cans, and it's neither in the street nor in the sidewalk. And because of the fact that each of those houses had trees planted in that grass area, unfortunately close to the driveway, sometimes that doesn't have the 14-foot clearance, so sometimes people are putting them on the grass adjacent to the driveway. I see great flexibility in the current wording. I see great flexibility in your proposed wording that allows subdivisions of different design to be able to comply and make it work. So that's my added discussion. Members of the commission, do you have additional comments or questions of Rochelle?
Is there anything you would like to see out that we put in that's either in the red line version or an addition? And I know some of you thought it might be too wordy, but if there's something, and you can always send your comments to Andrea, and I think she'll circulate them to the group. If you have comments, if you want to read this in more depth and then send comments her way, then she can send those around and we can retool this and come back. And just maybe as a point of interest, we're doing the exact same thing on the commercial side for enclosures and approaches and access also. So we'll probably bring suggested changes back to everyone on the commercial side as well.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Thank you.
Members of the commission, we have obviously a great deal of options at this particular point. If you feel you have enough to act, a motion could be made to approve changes or to go ahead and use the existing wording. But we could go ahead and continue this until the December meeting. We'll get to discussing the December meeting soon. You may already have some thoughts about whether we need a December meeting. But anyway, everything's on the table at this particular point. Are there further comments on this subject or motions?
Mr. Chair, I recommend that Mark comes up with the motion or gives it a shot. Dave and I have already. think staff's done a great job.
So the question at hand is the proposal, the redlined comments from November 19th, is that right?
Well, actually, that's, that's one option, is the wording that staff has proposed, is what you have there. Then the city attorney's office has a larger section here. And of course, then this is the current version. So within that, this is the current.
This is the proposed.
That's one proposal, and then what you have on the other sheet is another proposal. And of course, then off the table is, well, adjacent to this is the discussion, the wording that other cities and entities have considered. Many options. And if there's need for further consideration, that is not an issue.
How did I get on the hot seat?
Talk to your friend.
Mr. Chairman had to decipher what was already proposed a couple times before you arrived.
Oh,
Mr. Chair, I do think it's worthwhile pointing out that in conversation with Andrea and Carrie, there's not a rush on this either. So I think that's important to make sure we're all aware of. It's better to get it right if we make changes than to feel like we have to make a change.
thank you. I prefer to defer to another meeting because I wouldn't mind reading through this a little slower.
Are there further comments associated with that, or?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes.
We consider this in next month's commission meeting.
Okay. It's been moved that the issue be continued to the next meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the issue be continued to the next meeting. Further comments? Sensing the commission is ready for a vote. All those in favor of continuing this to next month's meeting signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? The motion passes. The next item on the agenda is the SWAC annual report. And first off, I want to make sure it's clear that Andrea did a wonderful job of drafting all of this. We've worked over it over the last month, primarily, Commissioner Glenn, checking the numbers and trying to get agreement. You have a draft in front of you. Commissioner Glenn.
The numbers, when we're talking about the dollar amounts, those are specifically for FY18. Money that we received in FY18. It does not jive with Republic Services report that Conrad presented. The numbers he has is numbers that he was given at the time the receivables are in. I can't book it until I actually get it. So there is a slight discrepancy between when he's got it reported versus when I actually get the money. So there's some money that he was reporting that A, we have not received yet, or B, was received and booked in FY19. So that's where, yeah.
And I do have a check for you. It's been at the Boise office for like 2 weeks, so
Cool.
I have to go through that. Yeah,
Cool.
sorry about that.
So yeah, so that's where the discrepancy comes in on those numbers. But everything else, as far as the beginning and ending balances, the expenses, the projects in process for this year, everything else is in line for what we've done in fiscal year 18, not calendar year 18.
So, just to restate that, this draft report that was on our desk that is consistent with the city's records for the money that they have received
Fiscal year 18, yep.
for fiscal year 18. Members of the commission, do you have any questions of Commissioner Glenn or have any comments on the proposed report?
And then I did, to go along with kind of two sides of it. So you've got the annual report, and then just so that you know, the SWAC financial report, that is what we started out as. So this will finish the year. This is starting the new year.
As you are finishing your consideration, I will make it clear that in leading up to the presentation to City Council, I will be asking for photos. So be expecting that request if you've got photos of any of the events that are identified in this report, whether it be Trash Treasure or Recycle a Bicycle or the annual event or anything else. We'll definitely be looking for photos. We may have to take a photo of the members of the commission and similar things. Members of the commission, are there any comments on the draft or any motions?
Would it be appropriate for a motion to recommend you take this draft? Is it considered a draft?
Yes, it is considered a draft, and so
Until we approve it tonight. This is this is supposed to be the final version if approved.
right. So if you have recommended changes, then so state. But if you don't, then then a motion would be something like approving the draft report for submission to the city.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion that the draft annual report as submitted be approved to go forward.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the draft report be approved for submission from SWAC. Is there further comments? Sensing the commission is ready for a vote, all those in favor of approving the draft for submission to the city signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay. The motion passes. The next item under old business is county SWAC and a proposed weight-based land fees. And this is a report from the County Solid Waste Advisory Committee to you so that you know what's going on. Conversations have been occurring over the last couple of months with the county in relationship to the fact that they would like to go ahead and no longer have any wastes being gauged when they're received up there by volume, and to have all of the waste received to the landfill be weighed and charged based on the weight of waste received. In lieu of activities that have occurred over the last couple of years, Republic has, I speak for Republic at this point, they can speak for themselves if they wish, but has concluded that that would be a good change. And generally, I think all the cities have agreed that it would be a good change. Specifically, there have been some discussions about how that occurs, resulting in a desire for it to be a very revenue neutral change at this particular point. Certainly the groups involved wished that a second step would occur then to go ahead and find out what money was needed for the operation of the landfill, and if there was a need for a different rate to be charged to go ahead and get the revenues the landfill needed, that be done as a follow-on activity to be implemented at a later date. And to that purpose, at the last Solid Waste Advisory Commission, the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, asked its chairman to go ahead and deliver a letter recommending that the process be slowed to make sure that we had some kind of a transparent and clear path for how the rates were set up, and to proceed with what's referred to as a cost of services survey at the landfill to determine what the costs were for the activities that were occurring up there. That was rejected by the county commission. The county commission has indicated that they believe that a proposal can be brought forward. It is my understanding, Rochelle, that we believe that proposal will be presented to county commission on Tuesday.
Mr. Chairman, I actually don't know the answer to that, so we are waiting for the agenda to come out this week to see if it's on next week's agenda, the public hearing. We did file a public records request asking for the documents used to vet the newly proposed rate, and we asked for a copy of the proposed rates that will go into effect just about 30 days from now. And we did not receive anything back on those. It said, the response said that it'll take longer than the minimum time to respond to public records requests. So they do have up to 10 days. I filed that on Monday. The outside, I guess, edge of when we can get those documents back would be next Wednesday, but we will be checking to see if the public hearing and the proposed rates will be on next Tuesday's open business meeting. So at this point, we don't know that. We'll check the agenda to confirm. I mean, maybe Teresa knows. Do you know if that's on next Tuesday's agenda? Okay, and I don't know either, so, sorry. So we may just get them in the mail, or we may get them next Wednesday, the proposed rates. Thank you.
And so to close my report, really saying exactly what Rochelle has said, I have no idea what's occurring. And that's actually kind of a statement from most of the members of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. And we kind of believe that there's something that's going to occur this coming week. But we're waiting for agendas to come out. We're waiting for documents to come out. And I do apologize, but we really are not sure where things are right now. And with that, as little as I can add to it, you're welcome to ask questions.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to echo that comment from a staff's perspective of being on various work groups with this conversation. We feel the same way. And so it's unfortunate that we don't have much more to report back to you, but we're not exactly sure what's being intended and when it's being intended to be discussed. So apologize that we don't have more.
Members of the commission, anything? Okay, we will keep you informed as we hear things. That concludes the old business. Under new business, the first item is Recycle a Bicycle program. And this is specifically in light of something that it's been on the edge of my mind for a year or so. Strangely enough, it was really Boise that kind of brought this up 2 decades ago when they went ahead and went into their concept of whether bicycles needed to be licensed or whatever. Most frames for bicycles have a serial number stamped into the bottom of them underneath where the pedals are. And so the opportunity exists to go ahead and check and see if that serial number has been previously reported on something. And in talking with our police captain, Captain Levy, that he's indicated that the police would be comfortable checking that against their records to make sure that there wasn't a previous report on this. And over the course of the last couple of weeks, he's actually sent us back a note and said that if a list were sent over to him of serial numbers, there is a person over there that's a data clerk that can go ahead and check those numbers to make sure that there isn't a previous report. Rochelle.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just laughing. I hope this goes into effect like next month, because we're meeting to give 16 bicycles to Meridian Middle School students and the social workers tomorrow. Do you want me to, I hate to give bikes and then have them scrub out as, we can do that. We can write them down. Maybe we can write them down and then swap out a bike for a child if they get one that shows up on the police list. Yeah, I don't know how soon Chief Levy wanted it to be in effect, but we can definitely do that. But tomorrow we have already one more event planned.
Rochelle, I appreciate that. And this, I'm not even sure we need to, maybe Republic, if they were in agreement, we wouldn't even have to do anything on this. But as far as I'm concerned, maybe starting in calendar year 19, that at that point, sending over a list of the serial numbers, and it's to Larry over in the police department, and it just needs to be faxed over. We'll take a quick look at it and make sure that there isn't some kind of a listing on it. And
Who does it go to? Did they say, or?
Yeah, it's Larry Crystal.
Larry Crystal.
And I've got this email I can hand you.
Okay, that would be great. I'll get that.
But
Thank you.
members of the commission, based on the conversation I've just had with Rochelle, is there anyone that has any questions, comments, or suggestions in relation to this subject?
Mr. Chair, I guess my only question is, what kind of reports are you even looking for the bicycles? Like, are they stolen, like that kind of stuff? Okay.
Exactly. There's some benefits to us. It makes sure that the city does not get into a situation of having dealt in stolen property. And, and it also allows for us to maybe have, and the result of it is if someone has made that notification and we found their bike, somehow it's managed to go through a different channel and get there, we'd have the opportunity to reunite someone with their bike in better condition. Well, maybe returned into an operating condition.
Mr. Chair, was the offer just for the bikes in Recycle a Bicycle, or was it for any bicycle that Republic,
Probably any bike, because
Yeah, we
we're
just
constantly
make sure.
giving them to like Central Academy and Meridian Middle, and they're,
Right. Well, I just didn't want, if the offer was for, okay, yeah, we'll do it for
Oh,
Recycle a
yeah.
Bicycle, because it's 15, 20 bikes, and now all of a sudden we're gonna start sending him a list of 20 bikes every month. And he's
Yeah,
like, oh, what, hang on a minute, this is not what I signed up for.
Oh, they're glad to do it.
I would think so.
Yeah, I think what my conversation is basically to protect Meridian. So anything we're involved in, it would be appreciated if it that has our commission's participation. But I would certainly suggest that actually I think the police department would be happy any number of numbers that you sent over there. They would be able to check extremely fast through their database to see if it's been reported. So, and that I leave to Republic, because obviously there are a lot of activities associated with this that Republic does directly. So,
I'd be curious what the volume of bikes that process through Republic Services annually. Talking.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Nelson, last year we did over 900 bicycles. So we refurbished and we took in and sent out 900. So it was a pretty, we did recycle a bicycle, and then we finished the year, we had a big event at Farmway Village. I don't know if you know, if you've heard of that. It's in Caldwell. It's, but we were out there, and we just finished the year with all the bikes that were left for this season outside of Meridian Middle, and that was 93 bicycles that we just met like maybe a week and a half ago and gave those bikes out. So now we'll be working all through the winter, getting bikes ready and storing them at the VRT, and for events starting, spring through the end of the year for the schools, and then in the summer for city programs. A lot of bicycles.
Just curious what the impact on the effort is for the gain. So if I go through a pile of bikes and 80% of them are going straight to some sort of salvage, but those that you're going to actually, or do you just do them all?
No, we don't do them all. We take all of them in, and we do strip them down. So whether they're wheels or grips or seats or seat covers or cables, or you can't imagine, we have the green 18-gallon recycling buckets that we used to use curbside. Those are all like pedals, handlebars, seat stems. I mean, we really leave them. If the frame is bad, we still just pirate everything off of them. So we have a lot of hybrid bikes, and but I would say at least 60 to 70% are able to be refurbished and then returned. Yeah, and those that aren't really, we strip down and reuse everything.
So you want to check before you stripped them?
Yes. Yes. And interestingly, this is just an aside, but last week we had a rickshaw dropped off, and so our guys have been using it to ride from the transfer station floor up to the front, and they litter pick along the fence lines, and so now it's really fun. They have a strapped trash can in the front, and they go by with a trash grabber, and they ride around in a rickshaw. That was the first rickshaw we've seen. It was kind of fun.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Oh, thanks.
The next item under new business is the Meridian Glass Recycling Program update. Rochelle.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I'll be fast. I would say wildly successful. So the drop site is way busier. Curbside, we've seen a number. I'd have to look. I want to say it's probably a little over 200 customers now have signed up for curbside. The drop site is really popular. So we allow people who come in to use the drop site to get one of the old 18-gallon recycling bins to hold their glass. And so those are really popular. So people are taking one of those, and then they bring them back full. During our operating hours, there's the big drop site that I showed all of you when the city decided to move forward with glass recycling. That's inside the gates, right next to the cardboard recycling bin and the hand-in-hand we recycle bins. There's a whole little recycling center. By 4:30 in the afternoon, when we're getting ready to close the actual transfer station, we move a 3-yard glass recycling container outside with a sign that says glass recycling, and that goes into the parking lot because it's lit and there are cameras on it in case there's any vandalism or any issues. And in the morning, when we open, we pull that back in. So residents have 24/7 access. We just made arrangements to have Momentum Glass come up and get our first load. We have been really impressed. We had to make a tool for the drop site because residents were dropping glass, and it was really steep right inside the windows of the roll-off container. So we have this glass bar we made so we can push it and level out the container. But it's been really popular. So I think residents really are liking that program. I don't know if any of you have used it. Have any of you used the drop site? No, not yet.
I used the transfer station several times recently, and those receptacles were being filled constantly as we're waiting.
Constantly, yeah, and it's exciting, yeah.
Members of the commission, any questions of Rochelle on the program or any comments? Well, thank you, Rochelle, for getting this all together. Councilwoman Malam, thank you for the council for approving this program and providing the money for Republic to be able to have a bin available at their site. We very much appreciate that support.
Big win for the city.
It's a big deal. Even if you don't see it, if I take pictures, there are a couple people every hour coming in and dropping off glass. It's well used.
Which brings us to the last item under new business, which is the SWAC December meeting and a general discussion about it. The fourth Wednesday of December is December 26th, obviously the day after Christmas. I guess if you prefer it and can be here on the 26th, it'd be nice to know that. But if you would prefer to go ahead and move the meeting to the week before December 19th, that would certainly be understandable. Let's see, we have on the agenda continued discussion about the placement regulations. And I suppose we would be up at well, I think we're early for the quarterly report for,
a little bit early.
That's the only thing that comes to mind that's on the agenda is the rules.
Mr. Chair, you may also have a landfill update at that point.
Yes,
You may also have a landfill update at that point.
the rates,
That's true.
hopefully, because they'll go into
Yeah.
effect in 4 days.
So, members of the commission, is there a preference on whether to have the meeting on the 26th, or, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong calendar. The 26th or the 19th?
I would prefer the 19th.
Mr. Chair, I was going to say, I'm okay either way. I will not be available on the 26th, so the 19th would work better for me.
I think the 19th makes more sense.
A motion would be appropriate.
Mr. Chair, I move to move our December 26th meeting to the previous week, December 19th.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the December meeting be moved up from December 26th to December 19th. Is there further discussion? Well, I guess I should say same time, same place. So at 4 o'clock here in
Same
chamber,
time, same place.
presuming it's available.
Hopefully.
Further comments? Sensing the commission is ready for a vote. The vote is on whether to move the regular meeting of the Solid Waste Advisory Commission up a week to December 19th. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The motion passes. I don't know who here I can ask to go ahead and follow up on that. Would that be
I'll follow up with Andrea.
Carrie, if you would, and tell us if there's a scheduling issue, then we'll deal with things by email, but at least for right now, the expectation is the next meeting will be December 19th at 4 p.m. in this chamber. And as I indicated, we have on the projected agenda the continuation of the waste placement rules and the any update on what is happening with landfill rates. If you have any other topics, please get them to me or to Andrea, and we'll add them to the agenda. Having completed all of the items that are on our agenda, we can consider ourselves adjourned. It is now 17 minutes after 5, and thank you for all of your participation.
John Mark.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This whole